Welcome to our Sunday Bhagavatam class. It is December 18th, 2020. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, today we begin with 1:8:45. First canto, chapter 8, text 45. Sanskrit is tang badhamityupa mantriya pravisha gajasavayam striyascha sapurangyasyan premna ragya nivarita. So, Kunti Devi has just finished her prayers. And just to give us a little context, the last verse was Sutu Vacha Prityaitam Kalapadaitas Parinutakilodaya, the Lord who makes everything prosper, thus worshipped, thus praised by the sweet words of Kunti, Mandang Jahasa, smiled mildly by Kunta and Moha Yanivamaya, and sort of enchanting Kunti with his subtle smile, as if by magic, sort of this magical power of enchantment. So now today, so Tang Ba Dhamityu Pa Mantriya. So thus taking his leave of Kunti, he said the word Badham. Badham is an interesting word in Sanskrit, actually. If any of you are following the Sanskrit here, Badha in Sanskrit means indeed, or really, or it's sort of used to express consent, affirmation, or confirmation. In other words, by saying Badha, Krishna was saying, like, yes, indeed, like all your prayers are correct, or thank you very much, and assuredly, certainly. So that's the word he used to agree with her and to thank her. So then Upamantriya means taking his leave. In other words, he excused himself. Excuse me, I have to go now. So Pravisha Gajasahoyam, and he entered Hastinapura. Gajasahoyam, it's just Gaja means Hastina, elephant, and the city known for its elephants. So Gajasahoyam is Hastinapur. So entering that city, the capital of the Kurus, which is now ruled by the Pandavas, because this is right after the Battle of Kurukshetra, Striyascha, and he also took leave of the other ladies. So what we're seeing here is that Lord Krishna is acting as a perfect gentleman. This is gallantry. He respectfully takes leave of Kunti. He's taking leave of the other ladies who were there with Kunti, very politely and lovingly, and Swapurang Yasyan. And he was about to go to his own city, which is Dwarka, Swapuram, his own city. So he was about to go to his own city. And then Premna, out of love, Rajna Nivarita, the Lord was stopped by the king, Yudhisthira. So Yudhisthira loves Krishna so much that he stops him. Krishna's about to leave. He's just about to depart, Yasyan, about to depart for his own city. And out of love, King Yudhisthira stopped him. So then, Vyasadhyar Ishware Hagyai Krishnena Devhuta Karmana Prabodhito Pitihasar Navudyata Sucharpitaha. So, So Yudhisthira was preached to, or prabodhita. Prabodhita in Sanskrit means sort of to bring someone to their senses or to awaken them. In the dictionary, prabodhita means awakened, aroused, sort of enlivened, like snap out of it, Yudhisthira, like get over this, because he's lamenting over Kurukshetra. So he was prabodhita. So Vyasa, etc., Vyasa and other sages who are Ishwara Iha Gyayi, who know the Lord's activities. So Vyasa and other sages who understood why there was a battle of Kurukshetra, what Krishna was doing, why he allowed all this carnage. So Vyasa and other sages, they understand why the Lord did this. And so they preached to, you could say in modern terms, preached to Yudhisthira, encouraged him, tried to get him out of his depression. And Krishna himself also preached to him. Krishnena Adbhuta Karmana. Krishna, whose activities are wonderful, amazing. He also encouraged Yudhisthira, tried to bring him back to his normal rational consciousness. And also the sages and Krishna did this api itihasayar, by citing historical precedents, like this isn't the first time this happened. This is what it means to be a kshatriya. This is what it means to defend the earth toward the end of Dwapara Yuga, in which things are already really going very quickly toward Kali Yuga. So they gave him all these historical examples, but na buddhyata, he didn't become encouraged. He didn't awaken from his depression. He didn't come out of it. Na abhudyata shucharpita, because he was filled with grief. So battle's over and everyone is just sort of doing what they have to do, funeral ceremonies, going back to their homes. But Yudhisthira is, he's overwhelmed and no one can seem to help him, to encourage him, as they say, snap him out of it. So Aharaja Dharma Sutas. So Dharma Sutta, Yudhisthira, Raja, the king, Aha said. So the king, son of Dharma, said, Chintayan Suhridang Vadam, and he's brooding over, he's thinking about the killing of his people that were close to him. Suhridang, I mean, we could, it does, well-wishers on both sides. So many people who were his dear friends were killed. And so Yudhisthira is just worrying about this, thinking about this. And prakritein atmana vipra snehamoha basangataha. And he was doing this, vipras, learned Brahmins, literally with a material self. Atmana means with a self. And prakrita means material, from the word prakriti. So with a mundane self, which is almost like, like false ego or self. So with the mundane self, sneha moha vasham gataha. He had come, gataha, vasham, under the control, sneha moha, of the illusion caused by material affection, bodily affection. Sneha. Sneha moha vasham gataha. So he'd come under the control of this illusion of worldly affection. And aho, now Yudhisthira speaks. Aho me pashyata agyanam, which means, see my ignorance, literally. See my ignorance. Pashyata means all of you. It's the plural in Sanskrit. Pasha would be in the singular. If you were saying to one person, see this, that would be pasha. This is pashyata, which means all of you, plural. Aho me pashyata agyanam. All of you, see my ignorance. Hridi rudham, which has arisen in my heart. So he's, this is Yudhisthira. You could say, like, how could he ignore all the other facts in the case? And so, but somehow Krishna has him playing this role of someone who is, prakritein atmana, who is feeling and speaking with a mundane conception of identity, of who we all are. And so Krishna wants to teach not to be in this consciousness. And so Yudhisthira is playing this role. So Hridirudhang Duratmanaha, so everyone see my ignorance that has arisen in my heart. Duratmana, I who am a bad person. Duratmana, just a bad soul. Duratma, Prabhupada translates it here, sinful. Duratmana. So parakyasyaiva dehasya, just for this body, which is parakya, meant for others. This is a theme in the Bhagavatam that's also said about Yudhisthira, that our bodies are really meant to serve others. We're not meant to use our bodies just to gratify ourselves. We're meant to use our bodies to serve others. And yet, just for the body, which is meant to serve others, bahyo me akshohinir hata, many akshohinis were killed. So Prabhupada says in his purport, a solid phalanx of 21,870 chariots, 21,870 elephants, 109,650 infantry, and 65,000 cavalry, that's big, is called an akshohini. That's like a complete army. There are other words in Sanskrit that indicate like a regiment, a battalion, but this is a full army. And as we know, there were 18 akshohinis. So this gives us a much smaller figure in terms of how many soldiers were on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. It's going to give us about 3.5 million soldiers. 3.5 million. So there is a figure in the Gita about 600 million. I have no idea where that number comes from, if that was a misprint, but the actual number of soldiers of Kurukshetra was 18 akshohinis. There are 18 Pauravas. The battle lasted 18 days, and there were 18 akshohinis. And Prabhupada here defines the akshohini. So it was about roughly 3.5 million people that died at Kurukshetra. Then Yudhisthira says, Bala, Dvija, Surin, Mitra, Peter, Bhratar, Guru, Druhak, Namesyan, Nidayan, Moksho, Yapi, Barsha, Yutai. So there cannot be, Namesyan, which means there cannot be, Yudhisthira says, there cannot be for me liberation from hell. In other words, I cannot become free from hell. Namesyan nirayan moksho, hiapi varshayutai, even after ayutas of years, which Prabhupada translates millions of years. Though I live millions of years, he says in the translation. So an ayuta is a very big number in Sanskrit. It is said here to be 10,000 or a myriad. A myriad just means a huge number, which is unspecified. So even if you take 10,000 by 10,000, that's 100 million. That's a lot. That's a lot. So Yudhisthira says that I cannot become free from hell, even after, millions of years. Why? Because I injured, I attacked or killed or just, gurus, brothers, fathers, friends, well-wishers, twice-born people like Drona, and children, young people. So, again, this is Yudhisthira's really, by Krishna's pastime, not thinking clearly here. Because, Drona, the people he fought against were trying to kill him, and they were trying to kill his brothers. And they were supporting an asura named Duryodhana. So again, this lamentation is not really, it's not rational. And it's here in the Bhagavatam, so we can become free from irrational grief. So the next verse, 1850, is Naino Ragyak Prajab Hartur. So for a king, who is taking care of the people, there's no sin, dharma yudhe, in a righteous battle, bado dvisham, the killing of enemies in a righteous battle is not a sin for a king who is taking care of the people. Iti me natu bodhaya, but that cannot encourage me. Kalpate shasanang bachaha, that instruction, that injunction is not, that cannot encourage me. It's not fit to encourage me because somehow I don't qualify by this injunction. Prabhupada translates that there's no sin for a king who kills for the right cause, who is engaged in maintaining his citizens, but this injunction is not applicable to me. In Prabhupada's purport, Maharaj Yudhisthira thought that although he was not actually involved in the administration of the kingdom, which was being carried on well by Duryodhana without harm to the citizens, he caused the killing of so many living beings only for his personal gain of the kingdom from the hands of Duryodhana. The killing was committed not in the course of administration, but for the sake of self-aggrandizement, and as such, he thought himself responsible for all the sins. Of course, that's not really why he fought. He never wanted to fight. He fought because Krishna told him this has to be. The world was filled with all these big demons, and to let them, they were taking over the earth, and it was absolutely necessary to stop them. So maybe we'll read one more, and if there's any questions, those can be sent in. Strinang madhata bandhunang droho jo savihotitaha karma bir grihamediyar naham kalpo vyapohitum. So again, there is concern with the women. Remember at the beginning of this class that Krishna took special leave of Kunti, and then he took special leave of the women. These men are gentlemen. They're gentlemen. They're not like, women to the back. Krishna himself, and here Yudhisthira, they're gentlemen. They treat the women with sincere respect. And so here Yudhisthira is concerned about the women. Srinang, madhata bandhunang, those women whose family, their husbands, fathers, sons, whose relatives I killed. Droho jo savihotita, an enmity has now arisen with those ladies, because obviously they're going to hate me. Obviously I'm their worst enemy. And these are royal women, and their sons or husbands or fathers are still kings. And so all these women now see me as their enemy, and I've caused this. So karma bhir grihamedi ayarnaham kalpo vyapohitum. And I cannot drive away this problem, this horrible situation, by literally grihamedi rituals. Yudhisthira is referring to Vedic rituals like, horse sacrifices or this or that sacrifice, in which sometimes there's violence, a horse is slain or other animals. And so he's saying that, well, he actually is going to say it in the next verse, but he's saying that simply by these karma kanda rituals, by these, he calls them griha mediyai, which here means not simply an attached householder, but here griha mediya means, Prabhupada translates it, in persons engaged in material welfare. So in that sense, it is griha medhi. So by rituals, by rites, which are meant for griha medhis, for sort of mundane families, I cannot drive away. I'm not able to, naham kalapo, literally, I'm not able to drive away this horrible situation and all the enmity I've caused with all these ladies who've lost their loved ones. And then Yudhisthira gives the example, yata pankena pankamba surayava surakritam bhuta hatyam tataivaikang nadyagyar marshtu marhati. So Yudhisthira says, just as pankena, by mud, with mud, and of course, in the old days, we used to in all the Hare Krishna temples, we used to make incense and sell incense. So they call it punk, P-A-N-K-H, which comes from this word, Sanskrit word panka, meaning mud, because the incense sticks in India were actually made from clay, from earth. And so panka means mud or earth. So yatha pankena pankamba. So you cannot clean muddy water with mud. Yudhisthira is giving these two examples here to say that if something is a contaminant, if something is contaminating, you can't take the same contaminating element and clean something. So pankamba, amba means water. So just like muddy water cannot be cleaned with mud, or surayava surakritam, or some vessel has been contaminated with liquor, drinking liquor, you can't purify it with other liquor. And so the analogy here, similarly, or he says tataiva, exactly in that way, bhuta hatyang tataivaikam, you certainly cannot purify one killing of creatures by sacrifices which involve more killing. So that's his point. You can't purify killing, by more killing. Bhuta hatyang tataivaikam nadyagyar marstum arhati. Marstum means to cleanse. So this is a theme in the Bhagavatam. There is a type of protest against animal sacrifice. You see it in the Puranjana story in the fourth canto, where Puranjana is killing all these animals for sacrifice. It's kind of like a legitimized meat industry or something. So he's killing these animals, and then Narada Muni comes and stops him and gives him a vision that all these animals you killed will come back in your next life and kill you. And so there is a lot of pushback, so to speak, against these Vedic sacrifices where animals are killed. So Yudhisthira says you can't cleanse muddy water with mud. You can't cleanse something that's, containing liquor. You can't cleanse a liquor container with liquor. And exactly in that way, you can't cleanse, you can't purify yourself from the killing of creatures with more killing through Vedic sacrifices. So that's the statement there. And that's the end of the chapter. So that's the end of the chapter, and we're going to see how Yudhisthira is going to get out of this depression he's in. He's going to get out of it by approaching a great devotee. And so that's chapter 9, which hopefully we'll do next Sunday. So now we'll see what questions there are. Question 1 I'll translate from Spanish. Who can give a final judgment, or one which is authoritatively conclusive, about a case like this? It seems that one would have to analyze many points. Can you see the subtlety of this case as there can be many others? I don't think it's. It's not so subtle here. I think. There are subtle cases. One example of a subtle case is when Krishna and Arjuna arrested Ashwatthama and dragged him back to their camp. And Bhima wanted to kill Ashwatthama, and Draupadi wanted to spare his life, release him. And so that was a case where Krishna had to compromise. In this case, there was a lot at stake in fighting the Battle of Kurukshetra. It's like, for example, let's say someone in a country goes and shoots the president and takes over, and then says, "Yeah, but I'm governing nicely. I mean, I lower taxes. Planting flowers on the side of the road. Yeah, but you killed the constitutional leader." The fact is that Vedic culture, as we see in the Bhagavatam Mahabharata, was not absolute monarchy. It's not that the king could do no wrong or that the king could do whatever they want. It was constitutional monarchy, and the monarch had to follow dharma, the rules. Duryodhana had broken the law of dharma, and therefore to allow him to stay in power would have very much subverted the constitutional government. So there was a lot at stake. There was a lot at stake there. And for example, if someone unconstitutionally takes over the government, you can say, well, why fight them? They're not doing so bad. So it's a question of seeing the importance of constitutional government, especially by the will of God, and having people in charge of the state who are actually bringing people to Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said that Duryodhana was doing a reasonably good job, but in a mundane sense, he was not fulfilling the duty of a king to bring the people to God consciousness. So there were problems, and therefore the case was not so subtle. Another Spanish question: could one say that Krishna is the personality of 1,000 faces or facets, referring to his innumerable expansions and incarnations as Vishnu Tattva? Yeah, you could say that. Krishna has Advaitam, Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam. The Brahma Samhita says that Krishna has Ananta Rupa, which means infinite forms. So, yes, Krishna is unlimited in his forms and faces. So, another question in Spanish. Krishna has multiple personalities in an exclusive body for each personality without failing to be todos y cada uno de ellos, each and every one of those personalities, the same and unique person. As I have heard that Lord Balaram is the second body of Krishna, but at the same time, he has a different psychology from that of Krishna, or in other words, he has his own and particular personality. Is this reasoning correct? Yes and no. I mean, Krishna does manifest a different personality as Balaram, as he manifests a different personality as Narayan, but it's all the same God. Advaitam, the Brahma Samhita, the same verse says that Krishna is Ananta Rupam. He has unlimited forms, but he's only one God. There's only one God. So I don't think we should get into polytheism here, and I don't think we should go in that direction that Balaram's actually a separate person, just because in his appearance as Balaram, the Lord manifests a different personality to some extent. That doesn't mean there are two gods. One say that that sickness of the mind, of the human mind, will come to be the deviated reflection in the material world of that mystic faculty of Krishna. Well, you could say that. I mean, Krishna actually does manifest in innumerable forms. If we think, if we have multiple personalities, it's a mental disease. Krishna is just engaged in infinite pastimes. So yes, Yudhisthira felt responsible for what happened to his citizens, even though he was not in power and could not be responsible since he didn't know or had any power over what Duryodhana's actions were. So, well, it's in the sense that he chose to fight the battle. Does that mean, in a way, leaders are a little responsible for what happens to their people, even if they are not directly responsible? The leaders are responsible if, to keep the analogy here, they do not fight to defend the Constitution. They don't fight to defend the Constitution. If they allow someone just take over the government unconstitutionally, then they're responsible for not acting. So why is there so much animal sacrifice described in the Vedas, even by pious kings? Because basically it was a mundane society. Even in Vedic culture, it was in many ways more civilized than today, in some ways. But the number of people, Prabhupada says that in the Krishna book, when Krishna entered Kamsa's wrestling arena, people saw him in different ways. And we can't really say that most of the people in the arena were card-carrying Vaishnavas. I mean, they knew that Krishna was incredibly beautiful, and they were attracted to Krishna in their own way. They loved Krishna. But as far as having a precise theological understanding that Krishna is God, not everyone knew that. And so the Vedic culture with all these sacrifices reflects the fact that probably most people on the planet then were not transcendental devotees. They were mundane people. What English translation of Mahabharata would you consider authorized? There are many that are authorized in the sense that they basically follow the story. Krishna Dharma is a famous one, and other devotees have translated them. And there's one by an unabridged translation by Ganguly, and also by Mr. Dutt. Those were both done about over 100 years ago. But they're accurate. I mean, in terms of the Sanskrit of the Mahabharata, they certainly knew Sanskrit and they gave accurate translations. However, Madhvacharya says the Mahabharata is a corrupted text, and therefore I'm going to try to do something with that. Was Mahabharata translated by any acharyas in the Gaudiya Parampara? No, such as Bhaktisiddhanta Bhaktivinoda, or even contemporarily. I mean, many very good devotees, or not many, but several very good devotees in ISKCON have translated it. How can we know for certain that we are acting correctly against asuras? Well, that's why Prabhupada started an international society, so we could have association, consult with good, sane devotees. And yeah, I've mentioned this many times. When I was at Harvard, I would go to visit the temple in Boston, then I'd go back over the bridge, over the Charles River, back to Harvard. And there was this beautiful old sign on the bridge that said, "The community of the wise is the welfare of the world." So the community of the wise, we become wise with association and community. Are we able to draw any moral conclusions about capital punishment by nation states as just punishment against murder, considering the point Yudhisthira makes in the last verse? By a nation state. Well, clearly there is capital punishment in this ancient culture. Clearly there is. If someone draws objections that the punishment is not fairly assigned because some people have more money and better lawyers, or there's some kind of just any kind of unfairness in the system, then one could argue that we should not have capital punishment without correcting that unfairness. But assuming things are done fairly, then yes, this culture, this Vedic culture, does certainly condone capital punishment. Do you see any parallels between the political events of the Mahabharata and modern politics? Yeah, bad leaders. I mean, worse leaders, because the leaders nowadays are, yeah, they don't really understand at all spiritual principles, not even religious principles. And they're not even, well, in some cases, there are some leaders in the world who are good managers. We don't have that pleasure in America right now. So, yeah, it's the general thing, bad leaders. But we know in Lord Chaitanya's movement, Krishna killed the demons. Lord Chaitanya preached to them. So yeah, there is terrible government now in probably most places in the world. So our duty, therefore, is not to go to war physically, but rather to somehow or other change things by spreading the Sankirtan movement. So thank you all very much for participating. And we hope we'll see you next Sunday. Well, I hope you'll see me next Sunday. Unfortunately, I can't see all of you. So have a great day, and arrivederci.